I had an investor recently call me and say, hey, Beau, you should do a video on what happens from the time a listing is signed by a broker to being exposed to the market. What's that process in between? Stick around. Let's go. Okay, the second a new listing is signed, meaning the BOV's been done, the broker and the seller have agreed on a price to go to market, they've signed the listing agreement, the first thing many brokers do, and sometimes even before this period, is they're going to call some of their A-list buyers. Before a marketing package is prepared, before the deal room is put together, they're going to give some of those buyers a heads up of the asset that's coming down the pike and going on the market. Now, the financials and all the marketing packages may not be ready to send to those buyers yet, but the broker wants to give them a courtesy heads up because they've done lots of deals with these A-listers who have always shown up on time, who always pay the right price, who are closers, who have phenomenal reputation. And the benefit is those A-list buyers are now able to start talking to their contractors ahead of time about remodeling costs for this property. They may drive by the property. They won't get out and walk around, but they'll drive by it. They start talking to their property managers about what they could lease the asset for post-renovation. They may give their attorneys a heads up. They may talk to some of their best investors that invest in their fund about the asset that's coming up. The next thing a broker will do is start building a Dropbox or a deal room full of all the documents that buyers are going to need to underwrite this deal. And not only underwrite the deal, but brokers want to go ahead and get all the documents uploaded that a buyer will need once they've been chosen, signed a PSA, and are going through due diligence. Because the last thing you want to do is scramble all around with the seller and their property manager trying to produce documents for that buyer who is now ready to go. I always produce a document for my seller listing everything I'd love to have in a perfect world that I want to upload to this deal room. Let me show you where you can find a copy of that. Or you can click on this video right here, which I did about the documents I asked for from sellers and gives a little more color than the document I just showed you. Now, this is important. The more prepared a broker's files are, which are often a function of the seller's preparedness and record keeping during their hold, then the better the broker can make buyers feel about submitting aggressive due diligence and closing terms, because the buyers will feel and know, like day one when they sign a PSA, they're going to get every document known to man because of how prepared the seller and the broker was. As the multifamily broker, I want the chosen buyer to feel like when that contract is signed, we're going to make the due diligence period as smooth as humanly possible because of our great record keeping. I like to use actual deal rooms. Deal rooms are oftentimes online portals that you can upload documents to. And what's great is once buyers sign a confidentiality agreement, they'll have access to this room, and any files or documents that get changed or updated by the broker automatically notifies everyone who has signed the CA. Which brings me to the next to do. The broker has to put together the confidentiality agreement. And sometimes you have to make sure that the seller and their counsel are cool with the way it's written. Once the CA is approved, that's uploaded to the portal in a manner in which, once it is signed, allows the buyers to access the deal room of documents. The next thing a broker does is prepare the offering memorandum or the marketing package. Now, these can take anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to do it right. There's lots of back and forth between the person who's preparing the package, sometimes the analyst on the broker's team, the principals who are actually going to be marketing that property as well, and making sure the seller and their team is cool with the way it looks and that it's accurate. Now, brokers do offering packages differently, obviously, from company to company. On one end, some brokers will prepare 100-page documents with 25 cover pages introducing each section and saying the same thing over and over and over again. So they're concentrating a lot more on the aesthetics and the thickness rather than the content. The content may still be there, it's just drawn out. And then on the other side of the spectrum, sometimes brokers want to keep it as skinny as possible possible and more meat and bones. I tend to be more towards the meat and bones, but I want to make sure the buyers have every piece of accurate information. Next up on the broker's list is to prepare the financials for the buyers. Yes, they had already done the BOV to come up with the pricing, but oftentimes brokers use models with lots of chicken scratches and they've got numbers here and numbers there, and sometimes it's hard to follow. But in order to come up with the value, they have their own system. Once the value is created, they then prepare the financials in a much cleaner, easier way for all buyers to read and interpret without having to go all over the place to figure out what the heck was going on in the broker's and the seller's head. Next up is the brokers are now going to prepare their buyer's list. Most brokers do a very good job of having a CRM that maintains every investor in the world who wants to buy assets in their markets. And if they've done it right, they've created criteria for each of these investors. The number of units they like to buy, the territories, the type of asset, the size of value add they're looking for, the ages, etc. That way, when the listing is sent out, they're not sending a 200-unit student housing listing in Florida to someone who only buys conventional under 50 units in Texas. If brokers just sent every listing they get to every investor in their database, then they become white noise to those investors who begin deleting or blocking those brokers' emails just out of principle. Okay, it's time to market the listing. How the property gets marketed depends on the seller. Most listings fall into one of two categories. One may be that the seller wants a full-on marketing program on websites, social media, email blasted, meetings, phone calls, whatever it takes. I want everyone to see my listing, and then we can negotiate and choose a buyer. And the other kind of listing is when the seller does want to sell it, but wants to keep it a little more quiet. Doesn't want it on all the websites, doesn't want it on social media, may want to keep it a little quiet from their staff or tenants. So then the broker is resulted to using their database, which is still composed of hundreds and thousands of buyers. But in both of those cases, there is a targeted buyers list created from the CRM. After the initial marketing blitz is performed, websites, social media, mass emails, all that stuff, the broker may have some additional special buyers they want to call directly to notify them about the listing. These buyers may not be the AA listers that we talked about earlier, but they are buyers who are most apt to pick up this particular asset. They probably own assets right nearby the subject property, or maybe they have done a deal with that seller before, or they've been really aggressive calling that broker a lot about buying that kind of asset in that market. Either way, it's the type of buyer that has a higher probability of wanting that asset. So if the broker hasn't seen a signed confidentiality agreement from them within the first couple of days, those brokers may reach out to those buyers specifically by phone. And lastly, depending on the velocity of interest will depend on when the market tours or property tours may begin and when the call for offers is. A really hot property with tons of interest may have property tours within a couple of weeks. And of course, a more difficult, untraditional type of asset may take some more time for investors to get their head around. So therefore, the tours will be a little delayed. And I'll leave you with one last resource. You should click on this video right here that I did a while back ago about how buyers are chosen and the process that a broker and their seller goes through based on a number of offers that came in. Really interesting video. As always, I hope this video brought you a ton of value. If it did, please give me a like down below. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell right next to it so you're made aware of my videos each week. See you guys on the next one.